So hello everybody. We are Paola and Gabriela.
Gabriela here.
We are teachers of English and we are comprehensive sexuality education advocates. Here we are with Jayneen Sanders. It's very early here in Argentina. Hello, Jayneen.
Hello, and thank you for waking up so early for me.
A pleasure. So Jayneen Sanders is an experienced author, publisher, elementary school teacher, mother of 3, and an active advocate for body safety, gender equality, and respectful relationship education, being taught both in homes and in schools. Jayneen has published over 100 stories for children and feels passionately that we can do so much more to keep our children safe by teaching them age-appropriate and empowering prevention education. So thank you very much for being with us here today, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay. So
I hope everyone can understand my Australian accent.
I'm sure they will be able to do so. Okay. So we have some questions, right, that we prepared ourselves. And we also have some questions that our followers on social media and our students at the Teachers Training College have sent us to share with you, right? Okay. So we would like to start by talking about the different topics that you write for that involve body safety and gender equality, right? So how did you, as a teacher and as a mother, become interested in these topics that you advocate for?
Okay, well, many years ago, when I was a teacher, a young teacher, I actually changed careers for a while. So I was teaching for a while, and then I became, I got into educational publishing. They needed an editor who was also a teacher. So I edited a book called Keeping Children Safe. And I thought, wow, this is great. And this is one of the first books that I saw on body safety. Back then it was called Protective Behaviours. And I thought, if I have kids, I'm going to teach them this stuff, private parts are private, no one touches your body. So when I did have children, of course, they were taught those sorts of things. So I realized, though, very soon that they weren't teaching this in schools. And I was on what we call the parent school council. So I wasn't actually teaching at my children's school, but I was on parent council. And I went to the school and I said to them, this is about 10 or 11 years ago, we should do body safety. It was actually called sexual abuse prevention education, but I felt that that was the wrong term because body safety is not about sex. So it's actually about empowering children. So I termed body safety. But so I went there and they just kept ignoring me. They didn't want to know about it. People felt embarrassed. So I thought, okay, what can I do? And that's when I decided I could use my skills as a writer, because I've also written a lot of children's books. And I would write a book that was age appropriate, that was able to be sensitively done and to help children get the message about their body being their own. So that's the first book, was Some Secrets Should Never Be Kept. And so that I wrote that book. We tried to get a publisher, and as I said, I have been in publishing and nobody wanted to publish it. And then I tried to get an illustrator, and Craig Smith came on board. A couple of others I tried didn't want to. They felt uncomfortable about the topic. So then my husband and I decided this book was too important not to publish. So we got a loan and from the bank, and we published it ourselves. So that was the beginning of this journey of these kinds of books. And so we established a little publishing company called Educate to Empower Publishing. So Some Secrets was the very first one. And there was one other reason. My neighbor, who is a very good friend of mine, she's now 85, she was sexually abused by her father. He said that he was teaching her to be a good wife. And then sadly for her and her family, she married an abuser who abused her son and her daughter for as long as they can remember. So she was very open to me about this. And she said, whatever we do, we have to educate children around safe and unsafe touch before they're in that perpetrator's web. Because once they're in that web and that person is saying, oh, this is how you show me you love me, and this is just our secret and no one needs to know, it's very hard for a child to break out of that. But with prevention, they know from that first inappropriate touch, it's wrong, and they need to tell, their lives are going to be a lot different. So I felt very passionately about this. And
Yes,
that's where the journey.
And abusers also know when children are empowered. And that's the very key to it. That's why we need to empower children.
They don't go near them.
No,
if they know that those children have some skills in body safety, they're off limits, because the most dangerous thing for a perpetrator is their secret will be told. So they will go to all lengths to stop that child telling the secret. So they're not going to pick a kid who goes, oh, there's my body safety rules on the fridge and I have a body boundary, and they're not going to pick them.
Or a kid who uses correct terminology to refer to their body parts. So that's another question we would like to ask you. Yeah, why is it so important to use the correct terminology when talking about private parts?
Okay, it is so important because children don't worry about these names. They can say elbow, nose, vagina, penis. It doesn't worry them. It's actually adults who are worried about these names. That aside, it's also very important for a child. Now, if a child comes up to you and says, Uncle Bill touched my cookie.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yes, now we can. Okay. Don't worry.
I'm so sorry.
Things happen. It's just life. Okay. Gabby has left too, so she will be joining us again.
Okay.
Soon.
Cool. So shall I go on about private parts?
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
So when a child, so the word cookie is another term for vulva or vagina. So if a child says, Uncle Bill touched my cookie, nobody cares. But if a child says, Uncle Bill touched my vulva, everybody is going to go, oh, okay, and something's going to happen. And also in Australia, if a child goes to a court of law, hi Gabby, if a child goes to, if the perpetrator is going to a court of law, the child must be able to verbalize where they were touched and using the correct terminology, or else it's not valid. So that in itself, body safety is like wearing a seatbelt. You may not have an accident, you may not need it, but it's a good idea to have it on. So it's the same thing with knowing about the names of your private parts. Just in case you're ever touched inappropriately, you'll be able to verbalize where you were touched, and everybody knows about it. And as I said, it's valid for a court of law. So it's very important. And kids don't care. They don't care that it's called the correct names. Start early. Mm-hmm.
You're right. Okay. Now we would like to know more, a bit more about the legal landscape of comprehensive sexuality education. I don't know if you call it like that. Okay. In Australia, as we told you before, in Argentina we have this law which was passed in 2006. Okay, CSE law, which establishes that CSE is compulsory at all levels and in both state-run schools and private schools. Okay, so is there a similar program where you live?
Okay, so in Australia we have I think it's 6 or 7 states. I'm in a little state down the bottom called Victoria, and yes, it is mandatory, but only just come in with some child safety standards. So it is mandatory, but the way it's worded, a lot of teachers and schools can kind of get out of it, if you know what I mean. They can get around it a little bit. And so if they're uncomfortable, they say they're doing it, but it might be that they've had a provider in for half an hour or an hour to speak to the kids about, body boundaries or something, and then left. So it's not what's the word? It's not being checked and to make sure that they are doing it. Now, in the other states, it is in the curriculum, but I don't think it's actually mandatory. Maybe one other state it's mandatory. But again, like you in Argentina, teachers are, a lot of schools are still uncomfortable with this whole thing. And so they're actually not implementing it as well as they should be. And, by doing that, it really makes me very cross, because they're actually putting children's lives at risk because of their own adult fear of this topic. They're actually putting young children's lives at risk. And if you speak to survivors, they say, if only I'd known, if only someone had told me from that first inappropriate touch it was wrong, because they're just children, then they have no knowledge. So, children may not be able to say no to an adult, but if they have the knowledge that they have the right to do that, then that can make all the difference. And as long as they've got a trusted adult they can tell, this could be the difference for that throughout their whole life, of how their life is going to be and become. So it's really important that we do implement it. And if you've got it, if it's mandatory in Argentina, seriously, teachers, please don't be scared. It's really age appropriate, and it'll make all the difference to your children's lives.
Okay, you have heard our next question, and it was about teachers being afraid of including CSE topics in their classes. Okay, but you have talked to them already. Okay, it's very important that they do.
Well, Gabby, I understand it.
No,
sorry. I understand their fear. But it's not as they think. When they look at say my book, My Body, What I Say Goes, there's nothing to be fearful about in that book. That book, this knowledge is just empowering children. So yes, please put your fear aside and empower the kids in your care.
Okay, thank you.
And it's important also to remember that we are empowering them in other areas as well, because boundaries happen everywhere, every time, in every aspect of our lives. So it's a matter of empowering them in every sense. So that's why it's so important.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Indeed.
So we have also some questions, as we told you, that our students have shared with us, and our followers have shared with us on our social media sites. So you are a teacher, a mother, and a writer, okay? So is being a teacher and a writer a benefit for the development of your own material, where you find content gaps in the material in the market? That's one of the questions.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not currently teaching. I'm currently just writing. But I have gone in and out of teaching. And when I go back into teaching, the kids certainly give me ideas how to approach a topic, where there is a need for a topic. For example, I was teaching a grade 3, which is sort of like 8 to 9-year-olds. And there were some girls in there who were really fearful of the boys. And they were going on a school camp. And they didn't want to go because they were scared the boys would be peeking on them and looking at them. And the only book I had at that time was my one on gender equality, which is Pearl Fairweather, the Pirate Captain. And it wasn't appropriate. It wasn't what I needed. So from that sort of experience, I wrote, Let's Talk About Body Boundaries, Consent and Respect. Because I thought about it from the perspective, we can have a perspective from the girls who was like, no, I don't want you in my body boundary, or no, leave me alone. But they were too scared. So I needed to do it from the other perspective a little bit, from the boys just saying, we're going to come, we're going to annoy you. Well, no, you can't. Teaching them that other people have boundaries and they don't have a right to go inside that other person's boundary, and they can't just push someone out of the way. They have to think about that person has a space around them and they have rights too. You know, for example, they might be on a swing or a slide. Well, that child is on that swing or slide right now, and you can't just push them aside. You have to ask, may I go on the slide now? And that person has the right to say yes or no. So from that encounter in school, yeah, I saw a hole and I feel that need. And also the other thing is because I'm a teacher, I always feel like I can talk a little bit more in the child's voice, but I also know as a teacher that you can get so much more out of a book. So we have lesson plans, which are all free at the moment, 54 of them, that will make the book, you know, more a bigger area that you can use, a bigger space. So it's not just about reading a book, but it's introducing the book and how that looks, and then, you know, unpacking the book and how that looks, and then reinforcing the concept. So I do think the lesson plans for teachers around the books give them so much more, and that's because I'm a teacher. I can see that. And yeah, I do definitely, when I'm in a classroom, I will see a need. And I really, at the moment, and it's not the most popular, but I really see a need for gender equality. I think it's the basis of domestic and family violence. It's where one gender thinks they have power over another. It can just take what they want. So I really think from, you know, 2 or 3 years old, we need to teach them that in all the big ways, you know, all genders are equal and have rights. And I think that that's a big hole right now. And I'm trying to put a bit of my gender in it. And my daughter is a writer as well. She's writing a book she's written a book called Love Your Body, which is about body empowerment for girls. But she's also writing a book called Be Your Own Man, which is about choosing to be the kind of man you want to be, which maybe have softness and femininity in it. So I think there's a need in that space. And that's all come from how I see kids interacting in the classroom. Yeah.
Okay, now
Okay.
we will ask you for some advice for parents or tutors. Okay, how can they approach these topics? Yes, in a way that children, especially little children, will understand. Okay, in their houses, in their homes.
Okay, well, I think there's just general ideas about listening to the child, giving the child the voice from a very, very young age, you know, interacting them when they're children and babies and saying, I'm going to do this now, and I'm going to telling them, explaining to them what you're doing, calling the private parts the correct places, telling them you do have a body boundary, that people need to ask for consent as they get older. You know, they have the right to not have to hug or kiss people. And people often say to me, look, that's in our culture. It's in our culture. My children have to kiss their grandmother. Well, actually, no, they don't. If they actually don't want to, that's okay. The adult has to be the adult about it. And the child can offer a handshake or a high five or blow a kiss. But we don't, if we force children into affection and towards adults, we're giving them a very strong message that their voice doesn't matter and they must do what the big person says. And that is very dangerous when it comes to sexual abuse, because that is what a perpetrator will use. I'm the big person, you do what I say. So we do need to give them a voice. And I hope through my books that I've offered parents scaffolding. I've offered them some kind of segue in that they can then use those books and the discussion questions and help them unpack it with the child, so they don't feel like, oh my God, what do I do now? You know, how do I teach this? I'm hoping that my materials will help them have these conversations. And the conversations are ongoing. They're not like, okay, today we're teaching body safety. It might be that, you know, someone at school knocked them over and then they want to talk about that and how it made them feel, and did the person, you know, ask consent if they could come into their body boundaries, and just general conversation. So the vocab of this education just becomes every day in their lives. And, and a child who knows about this when they're young makes for a very empowered teenager and adult. And we certainly need our teenagers, and particularly our girls, to be able to say no to sexual contact they just don't want. And if they've learned how to say no when they're little, it's going to be a lot easier if they can say no when they're older. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And that's why it's also so important to talk to them about who are trusted adults and who are not.
Yeah.
They require to talk to them, okay, in a safe environment.
Absolutely. And one should not be a family member. So if they have a safety network, which you talk about, 3 to 5 adults that they trust, one should not be a family member, because as you know with your statistics, a lot of the perpetrators are family members. So, it's very important that they have a trusted teacher or, somebody else, a neighbor who is there, who is accessible, and who will listen and who will believe them. And that's really important, that those adults are there for them. They're their safe person. Yeah.
Yes, the hands, all right, and they need to know that, trusted, that trusted adults are not a lot. That they can be very few indeed.
And
they
look,
can talk
as a
to
child
them.
myself, I'm not a survivor of sexual abuse, but as a child myself, it wasn't an easy. My mother had a mental illness. So, even me, I often think about like, oh, who would have my trusted adults been? And it was quite hard to think who they would actually be. So it's not always easy to find enough. But here in Australia, we have a kids helpline, which is amazing. And that, that have a website as well. So I guess they can be contacted throughout the world. And we often say that they could use the kids helpline as if they have no one.
Okay. Well, I will read one question. Yeah, sorry.
No, I wanted to say that this is why it's so important also that we include CSE, comprehensive sexuality education, at school. It's not only something that concerns the family alone, okay? Because as you said before, abusers, perpetrators are at home as well, okay? They are not strangers.
No. I mean, the statistic I have is 95% of children know their perpetrator. And so they're in our homes, they're in our communities. And so as educators, we are educators because we care about children. That's why we became teachers. So let's step it up one and just be there for them, because there are a lot of kids. I know the statistics here are 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 8 boys who were sexually abused before 18. So, they're in our classes. So let's step up and be that safety person for them. That's why we got into teaching, because we care about kids. So, being scared of this topic is not going to help those children. So we can do this. We can do this and we can be there for them, and my goodness, they really need us, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah, they really
and
do.
Never thinking that somebody else will teach that. I mean, if we are sure that somebody else will teach that, that's one of the worst mistakes we can ever make in that respect.
Well, in the family, there may be members in that family who deliberately don't want that to be taught. So it's not going to be taught. So if it's mandatory in your schools, then it needs to be taught. And it can be, and it can be done well, and it can be done without any fear or graphic information.
Okay, so I will read one more question that our followers have shared with us. Do you find collaboration or reluctance in dealing with these topics among your colleagues in general?
In general, a bit of both, really. Some people will be quite passionate about it, like myself, and take it on board and be that person in the school to push it forward. But there is a fair bit of reluctance. It's a lot better than what it was. 10 years ago, it was pretty bad. But it's a lot better than what it was. But there still is a reluctance. There still is a fear. I think I'll be trying to convince people this is okay for the rest of my days. So, yeah, it's not as. I think a younger teachers coming through are probably a little bit more au fait and happy to do CSE, and hopefully if we taught it in our teacher colleges, that would be really good, so that they feel comfortable that they can go out and teach this to the kids. So yeah, it's not as collaborative as I would like. Okay.
Okay, I have one more question from one of my students. Okay.
Sure.
She wanted to know whether there is some specific behavior change in children who have suffered some kind of abuse that we as teachers might be able to spot in our classrooms.
Okay. All right. So in a book that I do have called Body Safety Education, but it's also on my blogs on the website. So if you go into the blogs, you'll find a whole lot on body safety. And there's a list of things to look out for and changes of behavior, because it's quite extensive. But in general, children may become very quiet, withdrawn, or they might become really naughty and boisterous. You know, there is some kind of behavioral change. They might drop little hints that, you know, they don't want to go over there, or they've got a sick tummy if they see someone picking them up. So they'll try to drop a few little hints that something's going on. They may start playing with their genitals a lot in public places, classroom. They might start to rub their penis or vagina. Then you really know that's a red flag. But in general, they'll be sort of fairly withdrawn, and just there's a total change of behaviour in that child. They're not happy. And as I said, there is a list more others, like they may start to wet themselves and start to try and play with other children's genitals as well, that, you know, outplay what's happening to them. But usually you'll just see a change of behaviour, and they may drop some little hints for you that they don't want to go with someone or something like that. Yeah. It's really tricky to know. But I tell you what happens, though. When we read the book Some Secrets Should Never Be Kept, there's one of our states here has put that into a kit to go out with counsellors. Because if a child is being sexually abused, that book will sometimes just tip them over into the disclosure, because it sort of happened to that little boy over there. But in saying that, reading that book as a prevention tool for a child who's never been sexually abused is just another story. They have a lot of empathy for that little boy. But I mean, they might, if you are worried about a child and you think that there could be something going on, if you read that book, it may tip a disclosure, which you have to be ready for, and you have to know exactly what to do.
Yes.
You know, believe the child,
and ask for help as well, because teachers cannot work alone.
Ask for help.
We need to contact somebody.
And there should be protocols in the school.
Yes,
all of that should be there, what to do if you have a disclosure. But yeah, there's the website does have a lot of free stuff. It has a lot of good blogs, and there's a lot of information, because I know it's hard for you to get my books. So that way it's really good that you can find some free stuff up there. And there's a little animation called My Body Safety Rules. So that's really good for young children, and that's free as well.
Yes, in the website. Yes, it's Educate to Empower, right? And there we can find
www.
Yeah.
So E2E publishing.info. But you'll put that up.
Yeah,
so
we will share that info.
I guess
because we can find your books and many resources that are free resources to download, both in English and in Spanish. So that's just great. Okay, so before we finish, I don't know, is there anything else that you would like to share with our Argentinian audience? Something you would like to tell us?
Look, I just really want you to come on board and join us in this fight against abuse of children. I mean, they're children. They deserve a childhood. And we as their adults are the people who need to educate ourselves in this, and we need to give the education to them just in case. Hopefully they never need to use it, but we need to make sure we know what's going on and we educate them. And it's so important because so many lives are destroyed by sexual abuse of children. You know, there are survivors who are here and there are survivors who are not here. So it has long-term effects. Yet the prevention is so easy and so simple to do. So please, please come on board and teach this education. That's what I just really would love you all to do.
Okay, so I don't know, Gabby, would you like to ask her anything else, or?
I think it's okay. We have already included most of the questions, and Jayneen has answered all of them, even when we haven't asked the questions. Okay, so I think it's okay.
Okay, all righty.
So,
well, I hope that was
thank
useful.
you. Yeah, thank you so much. We're so happy to be chatting with you. So thank you so much for your time. You're very, very kind, and we have really learned a lot, right, by listening to you and by sharing this time with you. So
well,
thank
if there's
you.
anything else I can do, just let me know. Okay, if there's anything else I can ever do to help, just feel free to let me know. All righty.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm happy if you ever want any of the okay. And if you ever want any of the posters translated, you just translate them in Spanish, and then we'll make them for you. So
that's so kind.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's